Kanaka, Namaste and good evening. You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. Tonight, our special guest, the acting Prime Minister and leader of the National Federation Party, Professor Biman Prasad. Very busy man these days, and he had confirmed to us he'll be back towards the end of the year after a few months after he announced the budget. So thank you again for keeping your promise, Professor Prasad, and coming back to talk to our listeners and viewers tonight.
Pleasure to be here, Vijay, and look forward to the interview.
In the spirit of the show, everything is based on accountability and transparency. There's no personal attacks, there's no personal agenda. Straight questions, straight answers in relation to what matters to the people. We've finished about 10 months. The government came into place on Christmas Eve, a special parliament session on December 24th on that Saturday, and then you were announced as the Deputy PM and Minister for Finance. How have things gone so far based on your assessment?
Well, Vijay, first of all, I think we all have to understand, and we as a government, I as the leader of NFP and then subsequently, Minister of Finance, understood the huge expectations that the people had, in anticipation of the change. And as a government, as Minister of Finance and as a government, we realized that the people were still transitioning from the suffering during the COVID in 2022. So the first thing we did was to look at the existing budget. We tried to look at where the funding was and what was going to be not used and what was likely to go to waste. We immediately redeployed funds and we made sure, we started by focusing on the people. So we allocated $50 million to ensure that we give $200 each to every student from preschool right up to Form 7. And we managed to help 227,000 students, for preparation in the school, and a lot of people appreciated what we did. Subsequently, we took on board, as we had promised, to bring back real democracy, bring back media freedom, and we immediately got down to making sure that the media had the space, media had the freedom, and we were able to repeal the media decree entirely. And we are very happy about it. The media has now the Media Council. We've gone back to the responsible way of dealing with the media. So, and I think people have realized how much things have changed for the better, at least in terms of the ability of the people, the ability of the media. One of the journalists said to me when she came to my office, she said, I never thought that I would go into the Minister of Finance office and ask him questions. This is the freedom that is there for the media, and the government, ministers and people like myself, we are always ready to talk to the journalists and speak, candidly about, what has happened. Then we realized the expectation that people needed to come together. There was a lot of polarization during the campaign, and we started by making sure that we brought the private sector, the businesses. We started with a very successful National Economic Summit, and from that we were able to formulate. I appointed the Fiscal Review Committee, and we started the process of consultation for the budget. Then we, as promised, we established Girmit Day as a national holiday. We established Ratu Sukuna Day. There was a reconciliation, and then we went into the budget. Now the budget was carefully thought out, well prepared. We had to balance, Vijay, the budget in three ways. We had to make sure that we look at this huge, debt that was being piled up, and it was having a lot of impact. And if we didn't address it now, the situation for our people, for a country, would be worse in the future, in the next 3 or 4 years. So in the budget, while we tried to adopt a fiscal consolidation strategy by reducing the deficit from an average of about 9% over the previous years to 4.8%, And we reformed the tax system. So we had 3 VAT rates, 0, 9 and 15. We kept the 0 on 21 items. We added medicine. We took away 9 and had 15. So some items already had 15% VAT. And that is getting us about close to $500 million revenue. But if you look at what we did in the budget, we allocated additional funding to social welfare. We allocated additional funding to education, health, infrastructure, particularly maintenance. Because when we came into government, the first thing I asked the ferry, how much money have you got? They had nothing. They had spent the whole year's budget in 6 months.
And what was their budget?
More than $300 million. And on top of that, not only that, they owed $42 million to the contractors. So I can understand the people's frustration, up to this point, where roads have not been able to be fixed. The work is going now. The FRA, I had a meeting with the FRA people, the board last week, and I think the chairman is working. And I want to assure the people that a lot of work is being planned and done, and I think we would be able to resolve a lot of this. So what I'm saying is, as a leader of the NFP and as Minister of Finance, while we've done all these positive things, we also had huge challenges. We have challenges with respect to the labor market. We have challenges in managing the different interest of the coalition partners. Coalition, and we will talk about that a little later, I'm sure. But these are challenges that any coalition government will have. But what I want to say again, in response to that question, Vijay, is I understand, and the government, the Honorable Prime Minister understands it, that there is a huge expectation because of what we had in the past. And so we are expected to deal with all these issues as quickly as possible. We understand that. We haven't been able to do everything. Not every pothole in the country has been repaired. Not every health center has seen the painting again, although it's happening. Not every infrastructure in relation to water has been fixed, but the work is being done. There are appropriate funding that has been allocated. And we are determined to make sure that over the next few years we are able to fix this really broken infrastructure that has been there for a long time.
Fiji Village Straight Talk, when guests come on the show, they do not have specific questions given to them beforehand. The questions are asked as they come into the studio, and also your questions, the ones that you've been sending from over the weekend to midday today. Thank you very much. I'd like to assure you that I'll be asking as many questions as I can based on what you've sent. So we are also putting some questions together because many people were asking about the same issue, inflation and calculations. Professor Prasad, the Reserve Bank of Fiji has stated in its latest report, forecast inflation expected to be around 6% by the end of this year. Today, the ANZ economist, Dr. Kishti Sen, is saying the rate of inflation could be a lot higher than 6%. By the end of the year, it could be as high as 13%. What is your assessment as Minister for Finance?
So, Vijay, that's a very good question. I mean, the last time that the CPI, which is the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, is calculated using a basket of goods. So, you have certain items and you look at the prices of those items and the different weights given to that. You put that together, then you look at the inflation rate. So, the basket has remained the same since 2008. And when we are in opposition, we obviously raised this issue. So one of the things that I've done is I brought back Kimberly Nengama, who was a government statistician, very qualified man, who was unceremoniously removed. He is now at the helm of the Fiji Bureau of Statistics. And I have asked him, the work is already being done on rebasing the CPI basket, and the rebase will be more recent. It will be looking at 2019. so that, we have a proper basket. There are some items, for example, within the basket, would be very volatile. For example, food prices, food and non-alcoholic beverages. The weight there is about 34.7%. So if the price go there, up, in those categories, the overall inflation could be seen as very high. Transport is about 13.9%, housing, water 12.7%, alcoholic beverages, tobacco and narcotics category. So these baskets, categories of items will have to be looked at. The Reserve Bank is saying that the expected or the forecast, could be 6%. That's not unusual for Reserve Bank to forecast. What Kisti Sen is saying is that if there is a rebase, if there is a change in the basket of goods, if for example, some businesses are saying take out kava from the basket because they feel that kava price is
pushing
it up, and though if this is pushing it up, then they obviously perhaps have a different view about it, or it could push it or reduce certain as a result of certain items going into the basket. So I think the Bureau of Statistics is looking at this rebase and the basket very carefully, and it will be a true reflection of what is happening, because as I said, the previous government was using the 2008 base, and the same basket of good was being used to calculate inflation, and so some of the figures that come out sometimes appears to be very low, but in fact the situation on the ground may be different.
Impact is higher.
Impact is higher. So I accept that, and that's why I have already asked the Fiji Bureau of Statistics to rebase and look at the basket of goods that they're using to calculate the CPI.
We are also due for household and income and expenditure surveys because the last one that was done, and soon after that, Kemueli Naingama was removed as the government statistician, was done prior to COVID-19 in 2020. I think it was around February 2020. So the actual survey to take place, do we expect a new survey to be done as well?
Yeah, I think there is a period in which a new survey will be done, and that itself. But right now, Vijay, our focus really is to look at how. I mean, we understand. See, people have to understand that during COVID, the prices just shot up because the freight cost just went up, 3 or 4 times. So transitioning from COVID in 2022, the freight costs started coming down, supply chains were reestablished. Now the freight costs have gone. That is why if you look at some of the items, the prices have gone down, partly because the freight costs have gone down. But some businesses, quietly, were enjoying the reduction in the freight cost, but not passing on the reduction in the freight cost in terms of the prices on the supermarket
when
shelf.
you were here last, that was around July this year, I think we pegged the freight cost was just 25% higher than pre-COVID. And you were saying it was on a downward spiral. That has continued to go down, freight costs?
In fact, that is true. Freight costs has come down. But if you look at, Vijay, I had asked the FCCC to look at what they were doing in terms of review. So the first quarter after the budget, August, September, October 2023 price review on food products, actually, so they reviewed 232 products. 40% of those 232 actually saw the price decrease. Some, I understand what people are saying. In some cases the prices went up. For example, when we put out the budget, suddenly the chicken prices just went up. And we were trying to understand what happened. Essentially, it was the supermarkets just trying to say, so some of them were actually adding 15% to the 9%. So if we're increasing bed from 9 to 15%, it's just a 6% increase. So if you add 15% to 9, it will be huge.
And that's where you had asked FCCC to get out on the ground.
That's when we asked FCCC, FRCS, and I think they did a good job initially, because that sent a very clear signal that FRCS and FCCC and government was not going to tolerate unscrupulous behavior from those who should be ethical, businesses, business practice, to transfer the policy impact onto the prices. And so we followed that very carefully.
So acting...
there were other measures that we had in the budget apart from
the mitigation package.
Mitigation package. So for example, just on duty, for example, we reduced duty on meat products, chicken portion, chicken wings, beef, pork, and the prices have actually gone down. So canned fish, for example, the prices went down for almost all the brands. The oil prices have, for all brands, have also gone down since August.
When was this survey done by FCCC?
This is August, September, October review. The other thing, Vijay, that people also need to understand, that we did not touch those 21 basic food items. The basic food items VAT remained zero. And if the freight costs for some of those items came down, then the price for those actually went down.
Or should go down.
Or should go down. And if it hasn't gone down, then something else is happening. The other thing that we have tried to, FCCC has not done, is there was a request for increase in the port charges. So we've made sure that there is no increase in the port charges, because if you increase the port charges, which increased significantly in the past, it will add further to the prices of items, particularly that those that are imported from,
Just on FCCC, the Fijian Competition and Consumer Commission, there's some questions there, serious issues being raised about them, that it is in a reactive mode a lot. People are saying prices of items are rising on a weekly basis, mainly just after inspections may be done by Commission. Prices come down when it is raised as an issue publicly. What is being done about this, and what will be done going forward?
This has been brought to the attention of the FCCC, and FRCS also, as an organization which implements tax changes, tax measures announced in the budget. They work very closely with FCCC, but I take your point, and I think whoever is asking that question saying that has some truth there, because some, as I said, some unscrupulous businesses do that, and the message that I want to send is that FCCC as a regulator, we will probably have to look at their powers as well, the frequency at which they go and inspect and review prices. These are all issues that they are looking at. And as I said, for example, the review that they've done, and we want to, and the reason why I'm saying this publicly, for example, the review shows that milk powder price reduction. In fact, all the different brands have actually come down, and have come down quite significantly. So not all prices, Vijay, have gone up because we kept the zero rate on the basic food items, and because the freight cost has also come down, the prices should go down further.
But you agree that FCCC, apart from this review, should also be down on the ground,
should also
looking
be
out based
down,
on what consumers are
precisely.
saying. Now, in July this year, Acting Prime Minister, you had said you will speak to about 7 to 8 wholesalers who deal with about 90% of food products coming into a country, as freight costs had drastically gone down and continue to be there. What is the situation now, and are we planning to allow more traders to import and wholesale goods, or these 7 to 8 wholesalers who control 80% or 90% of food products are willing to cooperate and not to just play with the prices as they can?
I think that's a very good point that you make, Vijay. We have to work with these wholesalers. In fact, the FCCC is already planning to meet and work with these wholesalers. And as a government, although we don't want to interfere into the independence with which the FCCC works, but we are providing all the signals, all the policy advice from the Ministry of Finance, from the FRCS, and what we perceive, and people like yourselves, who bring these questions and situations from the public, through the media. We do follow these things very, very carefully, and I want to assure those who are concerned that these things are happening, that we will be looking at all these, through carefully, using these institutions and their expertise in those areas.
People are also saying they were told to tighten the belt going into the budget announcement, as we could not continue to borrow excessively. We needed to live within our means. People are now raising questions on those who are in statutory companies or institutions funded by the taxpayers being paid exorbitant salaries, and even more than the Prime Minister. This was made public. Now, this was not your doing. This was before your government came into power. Is this being reviewed?
Well, Vijay, first point I want to make, it's not unusual that some organizations outside of government, such as, Fiji Airways and FRCS and many others, would end up paying the CEOs and executives. Even our permanent secretaries get more than the ministers. Because the situation, with respect to what they do, the qualification and the work that they do is different from the political, appointments and parliamentary salaries, etc. But the point is that that the parliament, the government brought a bill to re-establish the Higher Salaries Commission, and the Higher Salaries Commission is supposed to look at all the statutory organizations to bring these so-called, and wherever there are exorbitant salaries and perks given to people, to be brought in line with what is appropriate and affordable.
Effectiveness and performance on organizations as well critical there.
Precisely.
People have raised about FCCC CEO.
Well, as I said, it's an independent commission. It doesn't come directly under the Ministry of Finance, and it has its own mechanism. I think the Minister for Communications, Trade and Commerce and Industry is the minister responsible, and I'm sure he's...
You are the money man.
I'm the money man. I provide the budget for all independent commissions, but it's the minister responsible. But, as I said, you have a point. These things are being raised by the public, and it is for the government to take those on board and look at how we can deal with it.
You also spoke about, when you were in opposition, critical analysis that about $500 million is wasted. That was during the Fiji First government in each budget. Have you found the wastage in different areas, and how are you turning them into effective use of taxpayers' money?
We've done a number of things within the Ministry of Finance, Vijay. For example, there was a CIU, Construction Implementation Unit, within the Ministry of Finance, which was set up in 2016, and basically, that unit was handling all the contracts. And we feel that, while, legally, everything might sound, good, the process of managing and accounting for value for money. For example, you have a contract, you start with a certain amount, and then you have 4 or 5 variations, and the cost, instead of being 2 million on which the tender was awarded, ends up with 5 or 6 or 7 million. And we found, many examples of that. Since I've come in as Minister of Finance, I've signed so many variations. But these are legally, legal contracts. But the point is that a lot of wastage has taken place, and I gave some examples of that in Parliament. And what we've done is we have plugged those holes. We have put a lid on some of this. So in fact, we have disbanded the CIU. It's now gone under the Public Service Commission Accommodation Unit. A lot of these contracts, we are looking at how the tender board, can be more efficient. We've got some good people there now. So all this, and it's not easy, Vijay, to do all this thing in 5 or 6 or 7 months. Some of the processes, organizational culture that was there needs to change. But I can tell you that we have put a plug on many of those, big wastages. And I'm talking about millions of dollars. I'm not talking about, thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're talking about millions of dollars.
Forensic audits are also underway to check if taxpayers' money was spent within the law.
That, I think, is part of the process, and we have said very clearly that if there are, criminal elements, if there is abuse of office, these things will have to be dealt with, and those responsible will have to be taken to task, by the law.
You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. We'll be back after this break.
I've always resorted to drugs because of the work that I do as a coping mechanism.
You said you started sex work and drugs at the same time?
I was 12 years old.
Do you believe, based on the current situation, your salary and allowances should be reviewed and reviewed?
Definitely, I think it should be reviewed to reflect what is there in the market.
Is the government of the day promoting nepotism within our community and hatred towards Indo-Fijians?
Thank you very much. The answer is no.
$1 in $3 of our taxes goes towards servicing our debt. So you can't say it's nothing.
There's also the need to do financial inclusion a bit better.
What is your message to the people who may rate you as not good enough for finals rugby?
Success doesn't just happen overnight.
Fiji Village Straight Talk with Vijay Narayan, brought to you by the Ministry of Health and Medical Services.
Empower yourself. Take control of your health. Breast cancer doesn't discriminate. It can affect anyone, from women to men. But early detection is our best defense. We encourage you to take the first step. Get informed. Get screened. Join the fight. Spread awareness. Together, we can conquer this disease. Schedule your checkup today. Your health is your power. A message from the Ministry of Health and Medical Services.
Welcome back. You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. Our guest tonight, the Acting Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, the leader of the National Federation Party, Professor Biman Prasad. And we are talking about issues, questions that have been sent and what matters. And as I said, we have to ensure that based on the number of questions, we're trying to get those answered. Acting PM, when will the salary review of the Prime Minister and Cabinet Ministers take place?
So Vijay, we, as you know, the Parliament passed a motion to set up an independent emoluments committee, which is going to look at the salaries, the allowances, the pension. And this is the first time, after 16 years that we have set up this committee, which was always the case before 2006. So what happened was, after the election, when Fiji First Party had won, before the first sitting of the Parliament, they brought the Parliamentary Remuneration Decree 2014. And under that decree, the salaries of the Prime Minister, Ministers, Leader of the Opposition, Speaker, Members of Parliament were established. And so what we have done is we have set up an independent Parliamentary Emoluments Committee, which is made up of members of Parliament from both sides. That committee has got the services of an independent expert, and that report will be presented to Parliament, and then the Parliament will debate, probably take time for people to understand that. It will be made public, and then the Parliament will vote and decide, what is the appropriateness, appropriate salary, allowances, etc. But in the meantime, in that Parliamentary Remunerations Decree, they had set these allowances. I know a lot of people are talking about it. We might as well talk about it now.
We'll talk about that allowances issue, yeah.
Yeah. So the allowances were set in that Parliamentary Remunerations Decree 2014. So, it was for the President, Prime Minister, Ministers, Assistant Ministers, Leader of the Opposition, and Speaker. So it was UNDP assistance, subsistence allowance plus 50% together with $300 per day for the President, 50% with $300 per day for the Prime Minister. Now the Fiji First government, and we opposed this in 2016, brought an amendment to the Parliamentary Remunerations Decree revised in 2016, and there the allowances were increased by a huge amount. So from UNDP subsistence allowance plus 50% together with $300 per day for the Prime Minister, it went up to UNDP subsistence allowance plus 250% together with $600 per day incidental allowance. For ministers, it went up to 200% together with $500 per day incidental allowance, and assistant ministers. So everybody had an increase in 2016. Now, what we are going to do, we had thought that this will be part of the Parliamentary Emoluments Committee report, but it's
taken 10 months.
It's taken a bit of time, as part of the parliamentary process. That is why I am now taking a motion to Parliament in the next session, just on the allowances, and there will be, and we will be announcing, substantial reduction, and probably go back to what it was in 2014. For example, if I can give you this example, the Prime Minister's per diem rate that would be at the moment would be about 3,400, depending on where, per day. Our proposed reduction, which has been agreed to by the Cabinet, and of course, with the endorsement of the Prime Minister himself, will reduce it to almost half. And that is what we had promised, and that is what we will do as part of the motion in the next sitting of Parliament.
Thanks for that clarification, Acting Prime Minister. Now, the Prime Minister was on Fiji Village Straight Talk 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
He confirmed there have been concerns raised to his office about excessive overseas travel by cabinet ministers, and he says they are being monitored, and ministers need to travel for some meetings, and they can send other people, including mission heads or join virtually. As Minister for Finance, can you confirm the number of overseas travels or the total cost this year of overseas travel?
Well, Vijay, I concur with the Prime Minister. We have to ensure that the overseas trips that the ministers take is essential, is important, and some travel is necessary. And especially for a new government, the level of international engagement is huge. There is a heightened level of interest in invitations that ministers are getting to speak. Some meetings where, for example, IMF World Bank meetings where I go, these are meetings where we go as a country representative, where decisions are made, where we also have negotiations on certain proposals, assistance. So some travel is necessary, but the Prime Minister is right, and I concur with it, that there are some travels that could be handled by our embassies, could be handled by sending other officials. But overall, Vijay, if I can give you some figures, from January to October, we have spent $2.5 million on overseas travel, which includes fare, allowances. A lot of the other trips, a lot of these trips are also funded by the international partners and those who invite us. I mean, I looked at the figure for year 2019 and 20. Under Fiji Fest, they had spent about $3 million on overseas travel. So, I've looked at the trend, the figures. So it's not exorbitant in that sense, but sometimes, when ministers are not around, I mean, for example, it happened last time that all three of us,
Prime Minister and three Deputy Prime Ministers out?
Three Deputy Prime Ministers, we were all out. So I think...
and the Fiji Public Service Association saying that at one stage about 9 ministers were out.
Yeah, so I think, while the number of people going at one time may sound, big, but in terms of the actual budget, but, the point is taken. First, we are going to get this motion in the next sitting of Parliament, which will reduce the allowance substantially. So it will reduce the cost anyway.
So for the Prime Minister, from $3,400 a day overseas travel allowance, you're saying cut in half?
Almost half. I can't give you the exact figure now, but because the motion is going to Parliament, and but it'll be a substantial reduction, almost by about 50%.
And you are also watching the overseas travel now based on the concerns being raised?
Well, I've had so many invitations, Vijay, from overseas, over the last 8-9 months, and many of them, funded. I have decided not to take many of them. In fact, I've declined probably more than 40 or 50% of the invitations, and out of the others that I've gone, these are very essential invitations where I'm required to speak, where I'm required to represent Fiji, where I'm supposed to have bilateral meetings to advance the interest of the country in a number of areas, particularly where we are negotiating, funding, where we're talking about, support, new projects. These are essential, and Minister for Trade, for example, I mean, he has to travel. I mean, trade negotiations require, most of the time, ministers. Deputy Prime Minister Gavoka, I mean, he is a minister for civil aviation and tourism, which also, and especially in the first year. So I wouldn't say that, the amount that we've spent is, overly, exorbitant, given the amount of wastage that we had seen, over the years. So, in a sense, and I think the Prime Minister has been very conscious of the criticism. I have been very conscious of the criticism. The whole government understands it. But I want to say to the public, with these figures that I have, that yes, people have travelled, ministers have travelled, sometimes too many have travelled at once. But I think the Prime Minister has told you and told the people of Fiji that these trips will be scrutinized very, very carefully, and only essential and required travel where it is supposed to be beneficial in a very tangible way, then travel would
and
be.
And you don't have to accept every invitation.
And we don't have to accept.
Because everybody wants a piece of you.
Exactly.
So you're saying it took you 11 months to come to the decision to take the motion because the Parliamentary Emoluments Committee had not finished with its work. You're hoping that the allowance issue would be dealt with quickly by the committee?
No, I think, you're right. I mean, Vijay, as I said, when we came into government, there are a number of things that we had to do, in the first, 3 or 4 months. And obviously, we had to take, proper legal advice. We had to look at the act. We had to look at, how this could be done. We wanted to do it in a holistic manner instead of piecemeal. So we wanted to set up an independent Parliamentary Emoluments Committee to look at not only just the allowances but also the salaries. One thing that people should remember, we are still on the 20% reduced salary. And this includes the Prime Minister, all the ministers, assistant ministers and members of Parliament. And I actually feel for my opposition colleagues, they are all on just $40,000 salary per annum. And people were criticizing us for giving additional funding to parties in the constituency allowance. The system has, we believe in making sure that the Parliament, the parliamentary duties of ministers and members of Parliament is supported. Because there is a lot of demand on all members of Parliament, even if you are ministers, and particularly on the opposition members too. So this independent review of salaries and allowances, I think, will create a bit of public debate, parliamentary debate. The report will be put out for the public to see. And then, we can come up with an appropriate salary structure, allowances, pension, etc., so that it's not done secretly as it was done before.
So your message is that a motion is coming through in Parliament by you to get these allowances reduced.
Allowances reduced, and the Independent Emoluments Committee will bring a report on other issues, particularly on the salaries.
We've had a lot of questions sent through about the civil service salaries, Acting Prime Minister. People have messaged in saying that the increments are long overdue. People are asking for civil service salary increases. They've specifically asked for salary increases for teachers. A lot of teachers are leaving, nurses, and also wage increase for unestablished staff.
Vijay, we have a huge challenge on our hand as a country. The labor market, situation, in terms of us losing a lot of good people, skilled people, is there. And in 2022, countries like Australia, provided opportunities for student visa where they could go and work for 40 hours. And in 2022, we saw so many people, teachers, doctors, teachers, nurses, accountants, professionals leaving on a student visa to go and study and work for 40 hours. I think that has now changed, and we expect, but we are still having a lot of people leaving our shores. How much we can stop that by increasing salaries and terms and conditions is another issue. For nurses, we recognize that fully in the budget. So what we did, we provided additional funding so that the nurses could be put on higher salaries, and we've seen salary increases there. We also allocated additional funding to create positions for nursing aid and nursing assistants, because the nurses are overworked. That is public knowledge, and we know that. And they work very hard, and we appreciate all the work they do. So we are trying not only to look at just salaries, but also to improve the working conditions and support that our civil servants get. In terms of the salary, Vijay, the civil service bill is huge.
$1 billion?
$1 billion. In fact, out of the $4.3 billion budget, $1 billion goes to debt servicing, $1 billion goes to the civil service salary. You may ask, why, we have such a large, wages and salaries bill for the civil service. I don't want to go into the history, the legacy issues, but as a government, we are prepared to look at what's happening within the civil service. Right now, our big challenge, Vijay, is to keep our good civil servants qualified. We are operating on 60% within the Ministry of Finance. Our vacancy rate is about 40%. So in some ministries, the loss is bigger than the others. So yes, what I can say is that there is a need to look at the civil service, the whole civil service, structure, whether it's salaries and wages, terms and conditions, performance management, productivity. We are still managing with 60%, and still very productive.
So you bloated in certain areas?
In some areas, in some ministries, that would be true. So I think the review of the civil service, in terms of salaries and wages, will be a good time also to look at how we can improve the terms and conditions, the working environment, and how we can retain our good civil servants within the system.
So you'll have a review of the salaries coming up, or review of the civil service in totality?
Both, review of salaries and the civil service.
Any time frame set for that?
That is something that the Public Service Commission will announce, Vijay.
So it's coming up this year or coming into next year?
It will be this year, and in anticipation of the next budget.
So at this point in time, there's no confirmation on any salary increases because you've already announced your budget.
Yeah, we are in the current budget. Whatever we've announced in the budget, particularly with respect to nurses, that stays.
In terms of people asking about increasing the minimum wage rate, what is your plan for this?
See, the minimum wage, Vijay, $4 took effect in January this year. So, and as I announced in the budget, we will review the minimum wage. The Ministry of Employment has already put in a process, and that review, the consultation and the process within the ERAB, consultation with the employers, will start very soon.
The issue is interesting there because you push minimum wage up, the cost of living increases also because the business people will pass on the added wages cost down to the consumer again. Do you expect further increase in cost of living?
That's not a very good argument. I think that argument was always used by those who opposed minimum wages. It does not necessarily mean that when you, in certain sectors, we used to have wages councils before. In certain sectors, we know that there are employers who can afford to pay more. In fact, what has happened, Vijay, because of the loss of skills, because of the growth, tourism industry, for example, tourism is back to more than what we had in 2019 in terms of numbers. So all the hotels are hiring labor, and there are people who are leaving other sectors. Like I had the president of the Super Retail Association saying, please come and work for us, if you're at home. So naturally, it is also pushing the salaries and wages. So the total salaries and wages compared to 2019, increased by 25%. But also the salary and wages rise has been on average about 10 to 12% over the last 8-9 months. So employers themselves are paying their workers more. So I think it will be a good time to do the review and look at the minimum wage, and that is something that the Ministry of Employment has already started as a process to do that.
The civil servants thought that the 25% increase covered them as well. If you can clarify that for them.
No, what we are saying, I'm talking about the total salaries and wages bill in the formal sector, but civil service salaries were not budgeted for an increase in the current budget, except for the NESs and the new additional positions. But we have funded all the positions that were vacant. So, there is funding for hiring of new people, filling those vacancies. In certain ministries, there is a need to fill those vacancies as quickly as possible. For example, in the immigration department, we provided additional funding for additional positions because we felt that that is where the services are being affected given the size. But we need some rationalization. Over the years, we might find that some ministries have more people than they need that could easily be used in other ministries. These are variables that the Public Service Commission will look at,
during this review that you're talking about. Yeah. You're watching Fiji Village Straight Talk. I'm Vijay Narayan. We'll be back after this break.
Cervical cancer is the second most common cancer among women in Fiji. But what is cervical cancer? And how do you know you have it? Cervical cancer is the growth of abnormal cells in the lining of the cervix. Nearly all cervical cancers are caused by HPV, a virus that can be spread through skin-to-skin contact of the genital area. Women in their 40s are at high risk of getting cervical cancer. Head to your nearest screening facility to get a PEP test and make a difference to your health today. A message from the Ministry of Health and Medical Services.
Watching Fiji Village Straight Talk, I'm Vijay Narayan. Our guest tonight, the Acting Prime Minister and Minister for Finance, Professor Biman Prasad. And as we've said, that there have been many questions sent from around the country, different parts of the country, and we are asking those questions here on Fiji Village Straight Talk. We'll talk about the coalition cabinet and how it's working, Professor Prasad. Issues arose in relation to the planned cabinet reshuffle a few weeks ago. And as leader of the National Federation Party and Deputy Prime Minister, were you aware?
The two things that I want to say, Vijay. Coalition governments are always a challenge. In some countries, coalition governments, the cabinet positions are all negotiated. We have a three-party coalition. The cabinet positions for Sudelpa were negotiated as part of the agreement. The NFP and the PA, before the election, we were in agreement before election to form the government. So when you have a three-party coalition, and I must say that overall so far, over the last 10 months, we have worked very well, the leaders of the three coalition partners. Coalition governments have their own challenges, but they can also be very good. And if you look at the experiences of countries, because there is a lot of internal checks and balances, transparency and accountability within the coalition government. So that's a positive aspect. The challenge, of course, is to understand that when you are in government, even if it is a coalition, you have a collective cabinet responsibility, you have a collective government responsibility. And the communication channel between the three leaders and the parties have to be very efficient, effective. And the Prime Minister took the decision on this particular issue, and he listened to the criticisms from the coalition partner which was affected. We were not affected in that way. Our portfolios had no reshuffle. Then there was an issue about the appointment of the Attorney General, and the Law Society, came out with his own view, legal opinion. And to the credit of the Prime Minister, he listened to that. And we as a government, took those views seriously. And of course, the Prime Minister then, took a decision that keeping everything in mind, the concerns of the coalition partner, the concerns of our legal fraternity, and kept the status quo. Now, Vijay, people can talk about, indecisiveness or how the reshuffle was done. But what we have ended up with, from the leadership of the Prime Minister, is the recognition that this is a government which is responsive to the criticism, which is responsive to the challenges within the coalition. That does not mean, that, and sometimes people have said, Biman Prasad is not saying anything, he's a silent partner in the coalition. That criticism is absolutely not valid, and it lacks understanding of how coalition governments work. We have a collective cabinet responsibility. All the national policy issues come to the cabinet. Cabinet is a place where we debate, we discuss, and we approve particular policies. So that does not mean that I don't raise issues as the leader of the coalition or NFP in the coalition. On this particular issue, on the resolution on Gaza, I said to the Prime Minister, the party decided that it has to take a public position on this issue, and we did. And the Prime Minister understood that the government colleagues, the partners in the other party understood that. And that's how coalitions work effectively. We can have, disagreements too about policy, about, our communication, about how we do things. But at the end of the day, we all have a collective responsibility as a government, as a cabinet, to push through our policies, our agenda, in the interest of the
Were
people.
you aware of the reshuffle beforehand?
I wasn't aware of the reshuffle.
So you were one of those, just like us, we saw that the Facebook post that a reshuffle is coming or the reshuffle has been announced.
That is correct. I wasn't aware of the reshuffle, and I made this very clear, in my communication with the colleagues within the coalition government. And I think to the credit of all of them and to those who were affected, I think everybody handled this situation quite honorably. Despite the fact that people may have been aggrieved about not being consulted, and the Prime Minister, to his credit, also listen to that.
I'm asking you the question as the leader of the National Federation Party and the Deputy Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, upon his return from Australia, he had a meeting with the coalition partners.
Yeah, three of us met.
What was your stand in that meeting?
Well, Vijay, as I said, my view as a leader of the NFP and as a Deputy Prime Minister in the government, I have very strong views about issues, and the Prime Minister knows this, the leader of the other coalition partner knows this, but these views, and they also have strong views, and these views are exchanged, discussed in an appropriate forum. I don't go out to the media and express my satisfaction or dissatisfaction, about a particular policy if I have not discussed this with my coalition partners and within the cabinet or within the collective responsibility of the government. So my stand is very clear. NFP is a party with certain principles, and we have a history of taking a stand on issues. But we also have a history of working together, of negotiating, of having dialogue. And when I don't speak out in the media, that does not mean that I don't have strong views or that we don't discuss this. And that's how good coalition governments work and are effective. And I think from that point of view, and I want to make this coalition government work, because this is what people voted us in for. We want to make sure that we run this government effectively, efficiently, and we can't do that if I run to the media every day, on every little issue. As a government, we have to have that collective responsibility.
I don't see that happening with the Prime Minister, your deputy, you as the Deputy Prime Minister, leader of NFP, and the Deputy Prime Minister and leader of SODELPA. But the SODELPA as a party is raising concerns about this. I think they are the only ones who came out publicly and said, we are against this. So how are you handling that? Because there's another setup outside your cabinet that's also making decisions or making comments.
The party, I think people have to understand that the party is separate from the government. Although the three parties are part of the government, once the government is formed, it's a collective responsibility because we all sit in cabinet. We're all sitting in parliament as a government. The party position can be different sometimes. For example, if a party management board decides to say something about a particular government policy, it's possible that they would do that. And in other jurisdictions where you have coalition governments, they do that. But I think as a government, and all the parties have to understand that. Sorolpa has to understand that, NFP has to understand that, PA has to understand that at the end of the day, this is a government of all three parties, and it is our responsibility, and we have chosen the Prime Minister to be the leader of the coalition government. And so we have set a responsibility to ensure that the Honorable Prime Minister is respected and given the space to make decisions, to have an opinion, to express an opinion also, which may not always be an opinion that would be shared by people in the party. Because if you don't respect that, you can't run a government.
Professor Prasad, you alluded to it earlier, but I will ask you. You and the NFP are being attacked by some. You would know that. They're saying you are agreeing to everything, compromising your principles. What is your stand on this, and what is your comment to those people?
That's absolute nonsense, because they are assuming that we don't, as I said, they're assuming that we don't express any views. The fundamental principle on which a coalition government rests is our ability to express our views, our dissent, our strong opinions within the framework of the government. Because if you don't do that, there are issues where you agree. For example, on the issue of Gaza, the Prime Minister and I agreed that the party will...
You agree to disagree?
We agreed that the party will take a public position on this issue and disagree with Fiji's votes in the UN.
And the China one as well?
We did that, and the Prime Minister accepted that. And that's how coalitions work effectively. There will be cases in the future as well where we feel that as a party we need to take a public position. On many others, we will be discussing it within cabinet, within the three-party leaders forum that we have, and we're going to have more regularly now, will be discussed there. Party, management board, party people, there are people who express views on social media who are, members of different political parties. Sometimes they disagree with the government. That's fine. But we as leaders in the coalition, Vijay, we need to understand that we have decided as three parties to have a Prime Minister. We have decided to have three Deputy Prime Ministers. Now, we cannot take a position every now and then to go and air our views publicly and disagree with...
You're trying to make it work.
We have to make it work, but we have to make it work with honesty, integrity, and within the ambit of collective cabinet responsibility and government.
You did say that you need to have more meetings together, more discussions. Will that be something that will become a norm now that may not have earlier?
That would become a norm, and I think the lesson that we've learned from the cabinet reshuffle issue is that we need, the three leaders need to meet more regularly. And I think the Prime Minister, the first thing he did when he returned from Australia was to meet both DPM Gavoka and myself, and we had a great discussion on a number of issues, and we intend to continue discussing these issues.
Are you also looking at further discussions with the Prime Minister in terms of, for example, the Gaza issue, where there's human rights abuses and Fiji takes a vote, and of course it was a vote. The Prime Minister said, I'm the Prime Minister, as a Prime Minister he can make unilateral decisions, and those who do not agree with it can raise it in the discussions. What is your stand on that?
No, as I said, I have already had discussions with the Prime Minister. We expressed, the party expressed a position, and the Prime Minister was very comfortable with that decision of the party. And as you said, it's not going to stop here. Of course, we will continue to discuss many other issues. And as I said, it doesn't mean that I have not discussed these issues with the Prime Minister, other issues in the last 8 to 9 months. There are issues where, we have disagreed with the Prime Minister, for example. When the Prime Minister was advised that, there will be a mini budget, soon after we got into government. But then, we had a discussion and we all agreed that there was no need for a revised budget or a mini budget until we came to the budget in June. So, and these are good ways of, you look at Vijay coalition governments in New Zealand, for example. The amount of time the leaders spend in discussing coalition matters, policy matters, coming to an agreement. And coalition governments in many countries have been very successful, precisely because of the fact that it brings a lot of internal discussion and accountability and transparency.
There's pertinent issues in relation to loss of skilled workers. How many people have left our shores? What are the statistics telling you? And what is your mitigation plan, knowing that you can create more job opportunities while people are leaving and turn it into a positive as well?
Vijay, I don't have the exact numbers as of today, but obviously the numbers that we are getting from different ministries, different sectors, the loss is quite significant. We have also got people going into seasonal workers scheme. So some of them take the opportunity to leave jobs, go and work there because they in anticipation of getting a much bigger saving. So these are issues. So what we've done as soon as we came into government, and if you look at in the budget, we have provided additional funding for training, technical education. For example, new institute like Pacific Polytech, the FNU is revamping a lot of this technical education. We have the big thing that we did, Vijay, is we wrote off $650 million of TELS loan. Now, part of the mitigation measure, all those 53,000 families where children, students who graduated are working, paying loan every month, all that income is now with them. It is something that is adding to their disposable income. The other thing, Vijay, people are not talking about, we didn't touch the income tax threshold. There was a lot of recommendation from the World Bank and others suggesting that we should reduce the income tax threshold from 30,000. We didn't. So that category of people are not paying taxes. Then we have put in measures to ensure that we look after our farmers in the agriculture sector. Apart from the sugarcane farmers, we provided subsidies for rice, cassava, ginger and dalo farmers on weedicides and pesticides. We've increased social welfare allowances, as I said earlier, but also child allowance, family assistance. So there's a lot of support for the most vulnerable, and also relief for those in the middle income by not touching any of those tax measures that people were expecting that we would do. So our budget is really not an austerity budget in that sense. It is a budget which is looking at how we can consolidate our fiscal position, raise more revenue, but we are also spending more on health, on education, on agriculture, on social welfare.
Also, we've had some straight talk sessions here where people have come and they've said major concern about lack of funding in the past for awareness campaigns. HIV/AIDS is a big one, where a number of people have gone into the latest statistics, and it's the total numbers are quite scary for people, that we need to do a lot of awareness and knowledge sharing in terms of hard drugs like meth, methamphetamine widely being used, glue sniffing is the other one. Awareness is another issue that has been left aside for many non-communicable diseases, and definitely you as the Minister for Finance would be looking at that closely, because the flow-on effect goes to the health budget. What are you planning to do for things like those?
Vijay, I think you've raised an absolutely important point, and I agree with you 100% that we need to ramp up our advocacy, our campaign. Prevention is always less costly. It's better than when people actually start suffering from these, whether it's to do with drugs, whether it's to do with HIV/AIDS, whether it's to do with non-communicable diseases. We lost that momentum. We lost that public advocacy over so many years. And what I intend to do, and we want to use all our media organizations, effectively as well. And going forward, we have some funding in this budget that we will be sorting that out pretty soon. But going forward in the next budget, I want to make sure that we provide, enhanced, significant funding for, not only public health, through the Ministry of Public Health, but also, education, campaign, awareness, and what are the pitfalls in which people can fall, if they don't practice, good habits, good, exercise regime, parents, children, schools, teachers. They need a lot of these advocacy and education. So I agree with you absolutely on that.
Final question. We've asked the Prime Minister and People's Alliance Party leader already. Mr. Rambuka has confirmed we are planning to end Fiji Village Straight Talk for this year with a joint session with the Prime Minister and the two leaders, you as the National Federation Party leader and Deputy Prime Minister, and we currently trying to arrange for SODELPA leader and Deputy Prime Minister Mr. William Avoka to speak directly to the people together on the work of the coalition cabinet, coalition government this year, 1 year in office. So on behalf of the people, we are asking you if you are ready for that session.
I'm absolutely ready, Vijay, and as I know that the Prime Minister is always open to the media, and we are very happy that as a government, we can now have this, very good, open relationship with the media, without fear, and so as a government, our philosophy is that we should, appear. We should be part of the media's strategies and platforms to talk to our people. And I think if you look at how the media has done in the last 8-9 months, it's been very good. And we are happy that the media has also held government to account on a number of issues. We've answered questions, and we are happy to participate in that as well.
Professor Prasad, thank you very much on behalf of the viewers and listeners for appearing on this show and for clarifying a number of issues, some questions that have been asked, people have been asking for some time, and that you took out your time to come on the show to address those matters. Some people may not be happy, some people may have been happy with the responses given, but this is straight talk. You get the answers straight, and then you can decide for yourself. Next week, we have another guest coming in, and Minister for Women, Children and Social Protection, Linda Tambuya, will be in studio next week at 7 p.m. Wednesday. See you there.